Greetings and welcome back to the channel. Ken McAuliffe here, the Jazz Vinyl Audiophile, on a Friday evening with nothing else to do in Manhattan. It's nice and quiet. The natives are just starting to turn and give in to their demon noise god, who will soon fill the streets with all sorts of aberrant behavior. And I will get my bucket of nails and drop it on them. And it will be a good thing. But anyway, we are here to discuss Steely Dan Uhqr Royal Scam. Now, I was thinking as I was making notes to put this episode together, what strikes me that was really different about this Steely Dan albums from other Steely Dan albums of the same period, both before and after. You know, contrasting it with later records like Gaucho or Asia, prior records like Katy Lied and Pretzel Logic. And it really struck me that this is a Steely Dan New York record, because it has a certain, there's a certain murk of the street in this record. There are also lots of people playing on this record, and most importantly, this was recorded in A&R Studios in New York City, A&R Studios in New York City, as to where Asia, Pretzel Logic, and I believe Katy Lied were all recorded primarily at Village Recorders in Los Angeles. Los Angeles, very, very different from New York City. I mean, extremely different. First time I went to LA, it was just like, wow, this is like a chilled out Candyland. And lo and behold, when I started reading the liner notes, Donald Fagen's new liner notes, Fagen writes, after recording 4 albums in LA, we realized we were missing the grungy realness of New York. We missed the frenzy pace, the piles of garbage on the curb, the sordid headlines of the tabloids, plus people and foods that aren't composed of polyethylene, plastic. Most of all, we missed the eccentric New York musicians and the seasoned hardwood floors of the vast Midtown studios. And because of that, this record, just for starters, sounds very, very different from all the other Steely Dan records. There's sort of a tension, there's a sizzling undertow, there's a seething underbody, there's more funk, there's a little more darkness, there's a little more hardness. I don't know if they wrote these songs in LA, but the performances are really just, you know, things are much more visceral. And there's also a certain amount of murk in the original recording. I would even venture to say that Katy Lied and Asia and definitely Gaucho they were much cleaner recordings to begin with, as where this sounds like a bunch of guys in a small studio. And as you'll see in the photos I'm posting throughout this, it is in a very small studio. You can see Fagen on a grand piano, right next to him Don Groldnick squeezed in on a little Rhodes piano, and you see a guitar player right next to Groldnick. So it is a smaller environment. It's not the big grandiose environment like LA studios where there's so much more room. This Uhqr was cut by Bernie Grundman, remastered from the original tapes, cut at QRP on Clarity Vinyl out in Kansas, and the pressing is beautiful. It's clear vinyl. I don't like clear vinyl because as someone who DJs, or someone maybe just wants to hear a particular song, it's very hard to see where the grooves start and finish with clear vinyl. But I digress. The casing we all know, the wooden spine that some love and some abhor. And if we do abhor it, you get this beautiful, nicely laminated gatefold sleeve. Now the original looks nothing like this. The original was not a gatefold. It has the lyrics. It has one of the cheapest looking photos I've ever seen of any record. But of course you get that. And you get the quality pressing sleeves. And you get all the quality and acoustic sounds advertisements. I wonder if in years to come, if these become collectible, and the Katy Lied box is already becoming collectible. I don't have it. I looked it up. It's going for like $300 if you're trying to buy it somewhere. The Uhqr specifications. I wonder if all these tchotchkes and all this sort of miscellaneous stuff will become as collectible or be considered, oh, you don't have that? That's part of the original packaging, dude. I'm not interested. But anyway, I digress. It's 1976, and what's happening in 1976 on AM radio, the radio has just started to switch to FM radio. If you were a freak, if you were a stoner, you know, if you were a dude, you'd listen to FM radio, which was starting to play like album cuts, and it was a very different environment, not to mention it sounded a lot better. But most things are still happening on AM radio, where Three Dog Night, Chicago, And Elton John kind of ruled the airwaves with little one-offs and one-hit wonders by any other artist. But I must say, it was a fun era. The mid-'70s was very fruitful. Um, there's even a Netflix series, I think, the '70s, when everything changed. I tend to think, I believe the '70s was the last great era in American music. You had the '60s, which was chaotic, but it gave birth to all this incredible music across all these different genres, including jazz in the 1970s. 80s really began the rise of mechanization, and by the '90s is very similar to what we have now, with but it's only further an increase, where you have a singer or an artist and a producer and a bunch of machines. And which really harkens back to the late 1950s. Fabian, Annette Funicello, Frankie Avalon, all that crap, is very, very similar to the modern day of Justin Bieber and all this just garbage music, really bad hip hop. But I digress. There have been 129 different versions of Royal Scam since its original 1976 release. Some of those, of course, meaning different countries. But going through Discogs, it looks like the major reissues of the record came in 1980, 1994, and now with this new HQR. And I've reviewed Gaucho and Asia, and those are undoubtedly just superior remastering jobs. They're really excellent. And what really, there's also on this record, which I think is kind of astounding, even more than the other records, are the number of characters that they write about on the records. There are so many bizarre characters. We have Kid Charlemagne. We have luckless pedestrians. We have a bookkeeper's son. We have the Eagles, another scurvy brother. We have policemen. They walked in from the city of St. John without a dime in the title track. You have jewel thieves and green earrings. And it's funny, I looked for old reviews, and Rolling Stone said, and it was actually a really positive review in Rolling Stone by some overly intellectual writer, every song concerns a narrator's escape from a crime or a sin recently committed, the ultimate outlaw album. Well, all of Steely Dan's records are about outlaws and degenerates and cast-offs and throwaways, and I think that's part of the reason their songs have such a lasting power, because they're so, from a literary standpoint, they're such beautiful recordings, they're so well written, and they're so weird and curious, and they're constantly catching your ears. Other odd factoids: Kid Charlemagne was based on Owsley Stanzi, a drug chef back in L.A. Paul Griffin, the keyboard player, helped write a lot of the Fez. Everything You Did has the reference to the Eagles. Turn up the Eagles, the neighbors are listening. Apparently, Walter Becker's girlfriend at the time loved the Eagles. And I didn't realize that, but in Hotel California, Don Henley says something about, we came at them with our steely knives, but we couldn't kill the beast. So that was their retort to Steely Dan. They were friends, and more recently that they have toured together, which I thought was really funny. And this also, as far as Becker's girlfriends, his troubled history with girlfriends, Haitian Divorce is about his divorce from from his wives. And I thought the cover art was interesting, created by an artist named Zox, who originally created the template for this with the towering skyscrapers as a Van Morrison cover. But then Ed Kareff, the art director for the label at the time, had them superimpose the Sleeping Vagrant on the cover. Even the cover is very different from all the other Steely Dan covers. It looks like New York in the '70s. It looks very gritty and hard and menacing. You look at Gaucho and you look at Asia, those are very sort of ethereal, minimalist covers, very beautiful covers. You could hang them on your wall as art. Katie lied as well, but Royal Scam kind of depicts, obviously, someone down on their luck, and he's having a nightmare with all these, buildings coming to eat him. So it is like New York City. There were no hit singles on this record. There were singles, but nothing cracked the top 20. Kid Charlemagne peaked at 82. The Fez peaked at 59, and in the UK, Haitian Divorce peaked at number 17. There's a huge cast on this record. I haven't counted it, but I think there are more people on this record than the other Steely Dan records, Gaucho and Asia, because there was still a wealth of studio players here. The cast includes Bernard Purdy, Rick Marotta, Larry Carlton, Elliot Randall, Denny Diaz, Dean Parks, Donald Grolnick, Victor Feldman, John Clemmer, that surprised me, Plas Johnson, Michael McDonald, Jim Horn, and they even had a nurse. Karen Stanley is the nurse. I haven't looked up the bass players, but I assume it's Chuck Rainey or Gary King. As I said, this record is not as pristine sounding, as minimalist in a way, not as pure sounding as Gaucho or Asia, and to a lesser degree Katy Live, because there's so many people on every track, and there's a certain amount of murk I think it just embedded in this tape. Now, in saying that, Bernie Grundman has done an amazing job. This is clearly if you really want to hear what's going on this recording, this is it. It like takes the murk, shakes it, and lifts it up and exposes it, brings it up to massive scale. And you can really hear every little thing. And not only that, the soundstage is amazing because the way it will present guitars or toms. I'm thinking about the talk box guitar solo at the end of Haitian Divorce. That thing is floating right in the middle of the room. The same thing with Bernard Purdy's drums on Kid Charlemagne when he does the around the set tom roll. And just guitar solos in general, like Don't Take Me Alive, that amazing, and most of these guitar solos are Larry Carlton, I believe, and the instruments really float. I don't think this is quite on a stellar peak as Asia and Gaucho, but the original recordings aren't either. The original Royal Scam, as I said, has a certain kind of murk. I'm sure A&R Studios at the time was a much older studio than the studios out in LA, Village Recorder or ABC, or there's one at Burbank. You're dealing with a different environment, but you're also getting that grit, that funk, that burn, that visceral, gut punch these songs have because it's recorded in New York with New York musicians. So let's go into some details, shall we? Green Earrings, which is apparently about a jewelry heist. I never could figure it out. I read that somewhere. It's about a jewel heist. Excellent separation of the clavinet chords. The clavinet chords are so punchy, and they're right in the middle of the soundstage. Tight, melodic, clean bass. The bass, electric bass, varies throughout this record. Some tracks the bass is clean, but it's kind of soft. But also on some tracks, I'll point it out here later, on one track you can hear when the guitar solo starts, the bass player is out of key, which I've never noticed before. So that was pretty remarkable. On Green Earrings, excellent sustain on all the instruments. There's great sustain on Becker's voice. There's more nuance, more texture, more subtleties going on in his voice. That's really fantastic. The snare is like a big stomp in Green Earrings. It's very intimate, very palpable. And as I said, it gets rid of the murk of the original recording. Haitian Divorce, everything very physical and 3D. The beginning, the acoustic grand piano is very lush. It's very full. You can really hear it. Excellent sustain on the vibe. Amazing separation and layering. It's the end of that track where apparently Becker cut the original solo, but Larry Carlton went in with the talk box, which Peter Frampton had sort of popularized a few years before. But that solo really, really floats. Kid Charlemagne, opening drum fill, comes out into the room. It just booms right out. It's very 3D what they've done in some instances. It almost reminds me to a lesser degree of what Peter Jackson does in Get Back. He uses AI to fortify some of the parts so that they're cleaner. And I bet we're coming to that era. I hadn't really thought of that before when they start using AI and remastering. Giles Martin, he used AI to some degree on was it the White Album or something, or the remix of Let It Be? Anyway, it's already happening. It'll only increase so. But the effect sounds like that because Bernie Grundman does such an amazing job on this. The snare drum really cuts on Kid Charlemagne. It's very punchy. It's very wide span. There's a lot of zing. The whole thing is, this album has some of the greatest rock guitar solos of all time, just one after another. Every track has amazing guitar solos. But their claim to fame, Reeling in the Years starts out with a burning guitar solo. So, and Charlemagne, the guitar solo is just supercharged. I'm pretty sure that's Larry Carlton. It's very hot on top, very brilliant sounding. Don't Take Me Alive, another amazing guitar solo. Once again, where you can really hear the vocal texture. It's all very palpable. Sign In Stranger, very meaty, lush grand piano, big scale on the grand piano. So this is 150 bucks. If you're a Steely Dan fan, I don't think I need to tell you you should buy this record. I love these records. These are part of my childhood, my upbringing, and it's great to hear them with this kind of pronounced clarity, and to hear this wonderful scale. It's really just brought to life in front of you. It's like something that was compressed and murky and dark. It's like they've shown a light into the production, and it all just wakes up. And, you know, kudos to Chad Kassem. Kudos to Bernie Grundman. Thanks for watching.